Hello, today we will start with the very first section, that is the expected questions on higher education. Now when we are talking about higher educations, we would be understanding one of the major topics, that is the Nobel Laureate seminar that took place this time. And when we are talking about that, the major focus would be the major recipients of Nobel Prize in India. So we have Rabindranath Tagore, who was the first Indian citizen to be awarded the Nobel Prize. Then you had Mother Teresa, who was the only woman in the list. Sri Aurobindo is important because he was nominated twice for the Nobel Prize, and that was the Nobel Prize in Literature and Nobel Prize in Peace. The next is C.V. Raman, who got the Nobel Prize for Physics, Amartya Sen, who got it for Economics, Kailash Satyarthi, who got it for Peace. So the name of the recipients and the respective arena in which they obtained the Nobel Prize is very, very important. The next important question that can form the part of this paper is, you have the book that has been composed by Mr. Narendra Modi, and that book is named as Exam Warriors. It's mainly to talk more about the examination issues to the student and to create a kind of fear-free minds before the examination. Now this has been published by Penguin India. So who has published this book is one of the important questions that could form the part of your question paper. The next important topic that we would discuss is, what is AIHES? Now this is a kind of survey findings that talk about the gross enrollment ratio. Now when we talk about gross enrollment ratio, this has been highest for Tamil Nadu and lowest for Bihar. So both of these are important, the highest and the lowest. Sometimes there could be a very direct question on what is the highest and what is the lowest GER for the various states. So you must be very familiar with the GER of the various states. The next is, the CAPE committee gave its recommendation for free education to girls up to the PG level. Now this committee was headed by HRD Minister and is made for a period of 3 years. It talks about compulsory education for girls up to the higher education level or the post-graduation level. The committee has following recommendations. So recommendations are important: providing facilities for health and hygiene, creating residential degree colleges for SC/ST, providing the basic amenities in the schools, and appointment of a counselor for adolescent girls. So those are the important recommendations. Sometimes there is a direct question onto which of the following is not a recommendation under the CAPE committee. So you must be very familiar with the recommendations. The next is the fellowship for higher education of ST students. Now this comprises of two schemes which have been submerged into the National Fellowship and the Scholarship for Higher Education. This talks about Rajiv Gandhi National Fellowship for ST students and top class education schemes for ST students. So these are the two schemes that have been merged into a single sector scheme starting 2015-16, and therefore it's very, very important. The next is Chalo India Anthem. Now Chalo India has been conceptualized by Ogilvy, composed by Lewis Bank, and the film has been produced by Nirvana Films. So who has composed it, who has conceptualized it, and who has produced this film, all the three are important. Again, this Chalo India School Games is a kind of first program to bring out sports vision and a kind of holistic sports attitude among the students. So that's very, very important. The next is, the Indian Institute of Petroleum and Energy Bill 2017 has been passed by the Parliament, and it talks about establishment of a center at Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh, which would be given the status of Institute of National Importance, and therefore it's important. It talks about high quality education mainly on the fields related to hydrocarbons, petroleum and energy. And the next important development in the same field is the India's first design university that is to come up at Sonipat, Haryana. So where you would have the world's first design university that would be established is again very, very important, and it's basically dedicated to a kind of creative domain for education purposes, mainly for the design purpose. The next is the SAMEEP. SAMEEP is a Student and Ministry of External Affairs Engagement Program. So it's a kind of joint engagement program launched to promote India's foreign policy and a kind of global engagement of students to the other nations and other countries. So it's a initiative by Ministry of External Affairs. Some of the major objectives include introducing students to India's foreign policy and the success story of the foreign policy and the functioning of Ministry of External Affairs. The next is, what are the measures to improve higher education in India? So it was basically we are targeting on the budget that has been allocated and how the government is planning to attract more and more talent towards higher education. So there is declaration of educational institutions as Institute of Eminence. So that's very, very important. Few universities has come out to be selected for the Institute of Eminence. Then you have HEFA, that is Creation of Higher Education Financing Authority, which would finance the higher education bodies. So these two are the important part under the improvement for higher education. The next is, we talk about a world-class university tag. Now this world-class university tag basically focuses on developing 10 public and 10 private institutes as institutes of eminence and bring them in the top 100 rankings at the world level or a global level. So these 20 institutions which would be selected would admit the students up to 30% from foreign countries, recruit foreign faculty up to 25%, offer online courses up to 20%, and enter into collaboration with top 500 ranking universities across the world. They have a freedom to fix and change the fee structure or the fee charges and would provide flexibility in providing the degree of courses. So those are some of the key aspects or the kind of autonomy that would be provided to Institute of Eminence, and therefore it's again very, very important. The next is, this could be a very direct question in itself: which foreign university is working on Make in India project or is offering now a course on Make in India? So this is the Stensbase University in Germany. So directly the name of the university could be a question. So for net examination, those are a kind of very direct questions those are asked. The next is Higher Education Funding Agency, that we called as HEFA. That was one of the targets for the higher education development. Now this talks about 6 universities or 6 institutions that it would work around. 5 would be IIT and 1 would be NIT Surathkal. So NIT Surathkal is important because it's just one NIT, the rest all are IITs. So it's IIT Bombay, Delhi, Madras, Kharagpur and Kanpur. So what can be a question could be a direct name, and they could put up as which of the following NITs is the part of the HEFA. So it would be NIT Surathkal, very, very important. The next is, so HEFA would be a kind of not-for-profit organization and would leverage the funds from the market. The next is, the National Council for Teacher Education Act was released in 1993. In 2017, an amendment was passed for it, and it talked about granting retrospective recognition to central, state and universities that conduct teacher education program without the NCET permission. The next is Chintan Shivir. It's a kind of 2-day seminar by the Department of School and Education Literacy for a holistic vision and holistic development, where individuals, stakeholders, NGOs and private schools did participated, and it also focused on a very basic aspect that says education is incomplete without physical education. So physical education, yoga, aerobics should be part of it, and therefore it's very, very important. The next is Deen Dayal Sparsh Yojana. Now Sparsh Yojana talks about scholarship for promotion of aptitude and research in stamps as a hobby. So development of or inculcating habits of learning about philanthropy or stamps is one of the major concepts of this scheme. It would be giving scholarships to students from class 6 to 9 who are pursuing philanthropy as one of their hobbies. It was launched in 2017. So the name of the scheme itself and its where it is applied is important. The next is India International Science Festival 2017 was celebrated in Chennai. It focused on developing science for New India, and it led down various contests, and one of the important contests there was the startup contest, where the academic institutions who are pursuing a kind of startup were honored. The next is Diploma in Elementary Education. Now so far there are many untrained teachers in the elementary education, and the National Institute of Open Schooling now says that they would provide diploma in elementary education to all untrained teachers. So far 15 lakh teachers have been enrolled, and they aim to train them by 2019. So that's the target for this scheme. Pradhan Mantri or Prime Minister Gramin Digital Saksharta Abhiyan, that talks about creating digital literacy in the rural areas to bring them at par with the urban areas, and the optic network that has been laid down in the rural areas should be promoted. So digital literacy, digital payments, digital financing are some of the major issues that are being promoted in rural area. The abbreviation for this is PMG Disha. That's again very important. So this scheme would be implemented through the training centers, and there would be one in every panchayat. So nearly 2.5 lakh training centers are said to be established. Now Justice Verma committee, sometimes there is a direct question on the committee. So you have Justice Verma committee that talks about the standard of teacher education in India, and it focuses on 4 parameters or 4 thrust areas, that is quality of pre-service teaching, in-service teaching, teachers' performance, and strengthening the regulatory functions of NCTE. So those are the key aspects that it work around. The next is World University Rankings for 2018. In that you had IISc Bangalore that was registered. So those are very important, and from India you had 30 universities that featured into its list, but none of the universities made to top 100 from India. IIT Delhi, Bombay and IISc Bangalore made it to top 200, and there are overall only 8 institutes from India in top 500. So there is still a lot more to go. So which are the universities which are part of top 200 could be a direct question that could be asked. Now Swachhata ranking talks about ranking the higher educational institutions based on the concept of the cleanliness. So that's again a new initiative to promote the Swachh Bharat mission within the school and the university campuses. The next is School Chalo Abhiyan, very important. The studies show that still of today 70 to 80 lakh students are out of school, and India has a literacy rate of 81%, which has increased from 18% at the time of independence. So what this aims to achieve is 100% literacy by 2022, and therefore we have this campaign School Chalo Abhiyan. So the vision of School Chalo Abhiyan is very important and should be taken into consideration. The next is 7 principles of good teaching. Now this is something that was in news recently, and it would be more part of your teaching aptitude section, where when we'll be covering the classes on teaching aptitude, we would focus on this in further detail. Now this focuses on 7 good principles that talks about increasing the contact between students and faculty, developing a reciprocation and cooperation between students, active learning, feedback, emphasizing time on task, communicating higher expectations, and diversifying the talents and ways of learning. The next is 3 concepts: digital classroom, flipped classroom and blended learning. Digital classroom is very clear. It's basically technology enabled classroom. With the help of audiovisual and ICT, you are developing the classrooms. The next is flipped classroom. Flipped classroom says the instruction would be received online, and you can apply the knowledge in the classroom with your peer groups. So that is flipped classroom. Under blended classroom, there is a combination of online instruction plus face-to-face instruction that takes place, and it is mainly provided by social media, online learning platforms. So that's a kind of blended learning. The next is Tagore National Fellowship for Cultural Research, Cultural Talent Discovery Scheme. Now, the only institution that was part of it was Jawaharlal Nehru University, the School of Arts and Aesthetics. So, that's again very, very important. The next is Swayam Prabha DTA channel and National Academic Depositories. Now all this we have covered in a separate YouTube lecture when we talked about the schemes that were released in 2017 in the expected questions for 2017. So you must refer all the classes of expected questions for 2017 for your 2018 examination also. Now you have the National Academic Depository that would have all the academic records in the electronic form or the digital form, and all these schemes become important. The next is schemes for fixing the quality of education and checking the dropouts. You have the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, which was a kind of centrally sponsored scheme for universalizing the elementary education, and it talked about all the children between the age group of 6 to 14 years should be given free and compulsory education. So section 4 of the Right to Education 2009 talks about special training for the children who are out of school and have missed the academic years. The next is a new IISER has been approved in Berhampur in Odisha and one more in Tirupati. So the two new IISER are important, that is Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. So this has been declared as an Institute of National Importance under the NITSER Act 2012. The next is the NAAC's revised accreditation framework. So NAAC has revised its framework, and there have been the new system where you have system generated scores with a combination of online evaluation, that is 70%, and peer evaluation, that is 30%. So that's a new system that has been taken into consideration. Now students are coming up with some questions where they are talking about Hindi. So Hindi definitely we would be covering soon. So that would be the next session that we would be taking at Examrace Hindi channel. The next is classes related to higher education environment. So we are covering those, we will be covering more of those, and resources. So as far as education section is concerned, many of you would be going through the conventional topics on education. Now for education, as per the recent 5 or 4 years trend, the questions on the conventional education part, the committee, the Kothari committee and all those are not being asked. What is being asked under the higher education is the recent developments, and therefore we focus on the recent developments and the things that have been happening through last 6 months or 1 year under this section, and it becomes very, very important and rather very scoring also. One more question from Subhash, who asked about the NIRF ranking. So we would be coming on to it. This would be part of this lecture itself. So stay tuned for that. Coming back to the next is Vidya Lakshmi portal. Now this is a scheme for providing education loan with simple interest that is being charged during the study period, and then you have the repayment that would be done. Besides this Vidya Lakshmi portal, there are other schemes for educational loans like Padho Pradesh Yojana. Then you have Dr. Ambedkar Central Sector Scheme for Interest Subsidy on Education Loan, the Credit Guarantee Fund Scheme for Education Loans, and so on. The NITSER Amendment Bill has been passed in the Rajya Sabha. This talks about National Institutes of Technology, Science, Education and Research, and it proposes 2 new IISERs, one at Berhampur and Tirupati that we have already discussed. The remaining 5 IISERs are at Kolkata, Pune, Mohali, Bhopal and Thiruvananthapuram. So those are again important. The next is Indian Institute of Management Bill 2017. Now this declares IIMs as institutions of national importance, and it grants autonomy to IIM. It allows IIM to grant degree to the students and establish a coordination between the IIM and the advisory board. The next is The special scholarship scheme for Jammu and Kashmir to encourage the youth from Jammu and Kashmir to pursue higher education. The eligibility is the student must be a domicile of Jammu and Kashmir state. The next is the survey by NSSO, and it talks about the various aspects. The current round, the 75th round, talked about the household consumption expenditure and the social consumption on health and education. The 76th round is scheduled for July to December in 2018, which would focus on drinking water, sanitation and disability. So every time, every round has different focus areas. The 75th round, you had education as one of the focus areas, and therefore it is important. The next is the scheme Protection and Preservation of Endangered Languages of India. This has been implemented by Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, and therefore it's important who implemented this scheme, and it talks about protection of the local dialects within the nation. The next is Science Scholarship Schemes. So under this you have three schemes, Scheme A, B and C. Scheme A talks about basic and applied sciences. Scheme B for women scientists talks about developments for societal benefit, and C talks about intellectual property rights. There have been numerous achievements that have been registered so far. Besides this, there is a Kiran program, that's again very important. It talks about knowledge involvement and research advancement through nurturing. It was launched in 2014 to bring gender parity in science and provide opportunity for women to develop into science field. The two components have been initiated under it. It's firstly the mobility. The second is the Kiran Overseas Fellowship for Women. The next is, under the mobility scheme, we focus on mobilizing the faculty to work with regular capacity in the state university or the colleges along with the institutions as IITs and IISCs. Maximum of 500 such awards would be given. The next is the Kiran Overseas Doctoral Fellowship Award. Under this you have Vajra scheme. Now this Vajra scheme talks about the development or nurturing of the talent for science, and it again has three components. So the three main scholarship areas are the SERB Overseas Doctoral Fellowship, then you have National Postdoctoral Fellowship and the Kiran Fellowship that we have already talked about. Vajra is basically the visiting advanced joint research for the faculty scheme in science and engineering for researchers abroad. Now this talks about the researches and bringing up the global ranking of the Indian institution. So that's important. Now science for children is very important. You had various programs for development of science in children. Some of the important ones focuses on Science Express. So the recent Science Express has its theme on climate change. Then you have the Children's Science Congress, the India International Science Festival that we already talked about was held in Chennai recently. The next is National Initiative for Developing and Harnessing Innovations. It talks about bringing in more innovations in the youth. The next is talking about tanking test and awarding the degrees for online courses. So that's again a new vision that UGC is coming forward with. We also talk about the NIRF ranking. That's again a very important part of higher education. Nai Udan is one of the major schemes where we talk about basically the minority groups who are working for the civil service examination, and for those minority groups we aim to provide financial assistance. So that's the basic aim of Nai Udan scheme. The next is Jigyasa. Jigyasa is again a very important scheme. So under Jigyasa we would have the CSIR, that's the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, along with the Kendriya Vidyalayas, that would join hand to provide scientific temperament among students. So it would be a science student connect program, and scientists would be connecting to students to bring in more awareness among the students. So a scheme like Jigyasa, Sparsh, Vajra, all these names you must be very familiar with. There could be very direct questions. So usually for NET examination The questions are direct. The only thing is you need to know on the recent developments that take place. There are number of schemes with foreign collaboration that are again very important. The next is NCERT books have been now a major focus. Many of the states are moving towards with NCERT curriculum, and UP is one of the states that has moved with the curriculum for NCERT. The next is there would be one single higher education authority that would inculcate UGC as well as the AICTE, and this committee would be known as, this authority would be known as HERA, that is Higher Education Empowerment Regulation Agency. Now acronyms are also very important. For NET examinations you have direct questions on acronyms. So you would have acronym, what is HERA? So it's Higher Education Empowerment Regulation Authority, and the choices would be so confusing that all four would remain the same, just the word empowerment would change. So E would change for all the four choices, and therefore you need to be very careful while answering your questions. The no detention policy that was so far there for the schooling system is now being removed, considering the fact that the education levels have witnessed a deterioration and students do not have a real motivation to study further. There are new Eclair model residential schools coming up. Now this Eclair model residential schools have come up with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, mainly in the tribal pockets, focusing on the ST population. In the last 3 years, nearly 51 such Eclair model schools have come up, and those are important. Now there is a question by Amisha, which topics we have to prepare from where these questions come. So for education section you have school education, higher education, scholarships and copyright. Those are the four basic sections under which we divide the questions that are usually asked. For now we are focusing on the recent developments in higher education, and our focus is on the recent development because as per the trend, as I already said, most of the questions are not from the general knowledge on higher education but from the recent developments that have taken place. The next is the Eclair model residential schools. The first state to introduce it was Maharashtra. Then UGC is changing the eligibility criteria for NET. Now since you are appearing for NET, you must be very well acquainted with it. So now the intake would be 6%, and that would be the entry level position for your assistant professorship. The assistant professorship. The next is the CCEA approves a new integrated scheme for school education from 2018 to 2020, and it would include Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, the Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan and teachers education, aim at to provide quality education, ensure minimum standards of living, equity and inclusion of support. It would also approve the credit guarantee fund for education loan scheme. So similar to the Vidya Lakshmi portal that we had already talked about, this is another scheme for educational loans, and this would be for the period of 2017 to 2020, and it would provide loan to nearly 10 lakh students who want to have education for higher standards. The next is Piramal Foundation along with Niti Aayog has signed an agreement to improve the health and education standards in the aspirational districts. To support the transformation, this collaboration would be for a period of 4 years, and it would focus on leadership, change management, technology and implementing the innovation practices. The next is Saath-E. Saath-E is a sustainable action for transforming human capital in education. It talks about a system of governance, transformation in school education, providing vocational education, introducing technology into classroom, and renewing or rejuvenating the classroom experiences. The next is the first Indo-French Knowledge Summit was held in New Delhi, and it basically developed a kind of Franco-India cooperation for next 5 years. Prince Charles launched an education impact bond, and that's very important. Now this would be program where you have a development impact bond, that is DIB, which would be released. This would be the largest bond of its type in South Asia, and it would improve education for nearly 2 lakh children in India. So this is again very important. Who introduced it? So Prince Charles introduced it. Next is PM Research Fellowship Scheme. Now many of you who are pursuing for your higher studies must be familiar with this. So this talks about focusing on the scheme for doctoral students to pursue higher research, and this would be mainly for a period of 7 years that it would be given, mainly for IITs, IISERs and IISCs. The next is Google and NCERT join hand for digital safety and talk about a pact, that is Safer Internet Day, which is celebrated on 6th of February, and digital citizenship and safety. So this brings about more awareness on digital issues and making internet a safer place. So that's again a new scheme or a new development that has come up. The CAPE committee was held recently, and one of the important achievements under it was Operation Digital Board that would be launched in next 5 years, and that would work on digitizing or technology enabled classrooms. The next is the CAPE Committee for Free Education for Girls that we have already talked about. Now Goa would host the 2nd edition for Nobel Prize series. Before that, here Amisha has a question that will the current affairs be asked from environment, education or any other topics? So usually environment and education and computers to some extent are the sections from where you have recent developments that come for your paper 1. DI, reading comprehension, have been conventional, aptitude section has been conventional, teaching and research is mainly conventional, but nowadays there are some applied questions that are being asked specifically for research, where you have a kind of case study and you are asked to explain what kind of research would be applied or what kind of method of research would be applied in that case. So that's again important. The next question is by Manas, who talks about the mock test. So we have released a mock test for 5 mock tests that would be sent to your postal address. So you can go for those mock tests and you can definitely benefit from those mock tests. The next is, we already talked about Goa, which would be hosting the 2nd edition for the Nobel Prize series. Now the Vidyarthi Vigyan Manthan, very important. It's a nationwide science talent hunt program or a science talent examination which was held in 2017, and it aims to bring in scientific awareness among the students. This test was conducted online. 8th September is celebrated as International Literacy Day. The theme for last year was the literacy in digital world. So for NET examination specifically, the themes are important, as we talked about in our classes in environment, that do focus on the themes. The next is Swasth Bacche Swasth Bharat program. Now this talks about a comprehensive and an inclusive report card for children from all age groups and their progress with the ability and the development. The non-lapsable Madhyamik and Uchchatar Shiksha Kosh, which is known as MUSK, has been established by Union Cabinet, and all the proceeds of higher and secondary education cess would be credited to this Madhyamik and Uchchatar Shiksha Kosh, which would be used for the various schemes in education sector. So all the cess amount that you are paying in your taxes would go here. The next is Niti Aayog partners with 6 states to transform health and education. Now 3 states for health and 3 states for education have been shortlisted. For health, it is Uttar Pradesh, Assam and Karnataka. For education, it's Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand and Odisha. So name of the states and which they have been chosen are very important. So make sure you do not miss those. The next is which committee? So we talked about Justice Verma committee, that was for the plight of teaching and teachers education. Then you have K. Kasturi Rangan committee, and this talks about a new national education policy. The other members include Mr. Alfonso and Mr. Ramshankar, who would be member of this committee, but this panel would be headed by Kasturi Rangan. So that's important. Then you have Times Higher Education ranking. This ranking was based on performance like industry outcome, the International Outlook, Teaching and Research, and Overall Institute of Medical Sciences, that's AIIMS. You have All India Institute of Ayurveda that was inaugurated in Delhi on the second day of Ayurveda. The next is the Footwear Design and Development Institute led by Ministry of Commerce and Industry. It was passed under the bill by Parliament in July 2017 to impart skills for footwear, leather goods and the management in the same field. The next is Institute of National Importance. Now, as we said, many of the institutes have come up as institutes of national importance. So, make sure you don't miss that. UNESCO is the first UN agency to admit Palestine as a full-time member in 2011, and now it has nearly 195 members. It's also known for its World Heritage Mission, and it publishes the Global Education Monitoring Report and Gender Parity Index. So sometimes there could be a direct question, which body publishes the Global Education Monitoring Report? So the correct answer would be UNESCO. So those are the kind of questions that you must keep in mind while preparing or working for these questions. The next is the question that one of our friends asked about the NIRF ranking. So the NIRF ranking is done on 6 category basis. So that's engineering, management, pharmacy, architecture, university and law. Now the issues that higher education has been facing so far is the issue of excellence, expansion, equity, college affiliation and low quality institutions that are mushrooming. Overall, IISc Bangalore achieved the first rank. In law, you had Bangalore, the National Law School, then the Law School of Delhi, which achieved the first and the second ranking. Then the overall toppers are IIT Bangalore followed by IIT Madras. Then you have the other 10 which are in list, they are given here. So you must be familiar with these names. These are really very important. Then you must also be familiar with the top universities and top colleges in the respective categories. So top colleges you have Miranda House and St. Stephen's Delhi. Top universities you have IISc, JNU and BHU. Then in the medical you have AIIMS Delhi, that's the top medical institute. Engineering you have IIT Madras and management IIM Ahmedabad. So these are the top ones, and then you have the complete list that is there. Must go through the complete list and learn it by heart. NIRF rankings are important, they are asked off and on. So this could be again a part of your question paper. Make sure you don't miss it. The next is Digital Gender Atlas that has been released by Ministry of Human Resource and Development. It comprises of composite gender ranking, vulnerability issues, children with disability, trend analysis of the gender indicators. Then you have the National Postdoctoral Fellowship, similar to the PM Research Fellowship that we talked about. This talks about fellows. Those fellows would work as mentors at a postdoctoral level after your PhD programs, mainly in the areas of science and engineering. Now, a candidate must have a PhD. The maximum age is 35 years and an age relaxation of 5 years is given for various categories. The next is Early Career Research Awards. Now, Early Career Research Awards are available at basically the schemes that provide the research support for the young researchers, and they talk about developing innovation for research. The nature and the duration has been given here, so again it's important. UAY, that is the Uchitar Avishkar Yojana, and Imprint provide research facilities for higher education. So Uchitar Avishkar Yojana, it's basically a kind of outcome oriented research projects that have come up. It talks about innovation mainly in IITs and manufacturing sectors, bringing in more innovative mindset, creativity and research focus is the sole objective. Under Imprint, we talk about again bringing in scientific research and the funding support that should be developed. The next is Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. It enables the higher education institutes to work in line with the rural people or the rural areas to diversify the developmental challenges that are being faced in the rural areas. So those are again very important. So don't miss that. The next is National Teacher Platform. Now this is an initiative of MHRD. It talks about a common platform for teachers where they could exchange knowledge, the resources for teaching, for practice and assessment, and this would amplify the reach and the benefit by learning from one teacher to another. The next is RISE, very important. Again, the acronym itself is important for this scheme. It's Revitalizing Infrastructure and Systems in Education scheme. So, IIT is set to get nearly 25% of the government loans for higher education institutes, and RISE was announced in the recent budget 2017-18. It aims to basically lower the funds to the government higher education institutes and low cost funds should be given to them so as to pursue the higher education and the developments for the same. So this was only the first part of the higher education. We will be coming up with one more part on higher education. Then we would also focus on some of the important committees, like recently you had Professor Yashpal in news. So Yashpal committee on higher education becomes important. So that we would be discussing in one of the separate lectures, and the next lecture would be this week itself, and towards very close to your examination we would have a final updates on the higher education, because this is a section where you can really score very good if you are very familiar with the recent developments and the innovations that have come up for the higher education. So make sure you do not miss it. Do subscribe. If you have any doubts, put those as comment and I'll be happy to answer those. Have a very